during the discussion part, and you are worried you're going to forget them or that they might get overlooked, you can always put those in the chat. And if it's not covered during the first part of the discussion, then we will come back and talk about those questions at the end.
Perfect. Thank you, Jessica. We'll let you take it over.
All right, Shavua Tov, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us with the Adult Education Committee and our two honored guests who are going to engage in a kind of a fishbowl conversation. So the three of us will be speaking and talking amongst ourselves in a public way, knowing that everyone is listening in, and hearing some stories and sharing some experiences and responses to both the words and the work of Dr. King historically and some more recent events that have been happening in our country. So if you don't know me, you probably do, but maybe you don't. I am Jessica Delara. I am the student rabbi. And as Rabbi Small likes to say, I am the Resnick Weinstein Fellow at the Emanuel Synagogue this year. This is my second year. I started as a monthly student rabbi last year, right around the High Holy Days. And so now it is my honor to introduce our two guests, one who may be familiar to you and one who's probably not. I'll let them introduce themselves more thoroughly. So we have Monique Faison-Ross and Booker Holton, and they'll tell you more about themselves. So when we get to you, tell us your name, your location. Actually, none of the three of us are in the state of Connecticut right now. And your connection to the Emanuel and or the Hartford, West Hartford area. And just for fun, as an icebreaker, what is your favorite Jewish ritual or observance or bracha? So let's have, maybe Monique, will you go first?
Sure. Hello to all of my friends that I'm familiar with, and I miss you all. Thank you for inviting me. Jessica and the Adult Education Committee always has fantastic programming, and I appreciate being invited. My connection to the Emanuel is I've been a member for probably, I think, 17, 18 years, and recently moved and left West Hartford after being there 24 years to relocate to the Jersey Shore. Nothing like the show. I've never seen it, but it's nothing like that. I moved in July. So I still feel connected to the Emanuel. It's still my shul. We haven't found a new one in the pandemic. Let's see what else. Also, my wedding to my wife was the first same-sex wedding in Emanuel's then 95-year history. I'm very proud of that and very grateful to the Emanuel for letting us have the wedding of our dreams. And let's see what else. 2 of my 4 children were B'nai Mitzvah there. I miss it. My favorite, thank you. My favorite blessing is the parent blessing on Shabbat. It always has been. I just love it. It's a moment of solitude to bless my children. And that's my favorite.
Nice. Thank you, Monique. All right, we'll turn it over. We'll introduce anew to many of you my friend Booker Holton, who, as you see, the sunlight in the windows behind him is not even on the East Coast, and is a friend from my home synagogue, and he'll tell you more. Booker?
Well, thank you for inviting me, and for the first time, thank you for inviting me to sort of the inside of Emanuel. I appreciate it. My name is Booker Holton, and I'm from a wonderful place that you know nothing about. It's called, I live now in Orinda, California. You don't know where that is, but you know where the San Francisco Bay Area is. And so we're still part of the San Francisco Bay. I live about 12 miles, depends on how fast you drive, from San Francisco. Why is Emanuel important to me, and why is West Hartford important to me? I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut. And I went to a wonderful high school called Weaver High School, where we had a tremendous Jewish population.
Mm.
And we know when you look at I still get the Hartford Current, online, and I look through it, and you look at the obituary sections, and you see a lot of people, a lot of Jews, who went to Weaver High School way back in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. And so I'm happy to say that I graduated from the school with a proud Jewish and African American really legacy. And that's my connection to West Hartford.
Wow.
I have been in the California since 1973 when I came out to graduate school. I thought I would go back, but here I am. My favorite Jewish ritual, I think, it changes. This year, for example, it was a special because everything was done online for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the services. And I felt for the first time closer, for example, to the inner feelings of my soul because of that, than even when I was attending, the synagogue in person. So it was a very, very interesting time that I went through. Actually, my favorite, I love the Shema, and I do that. It's a meditative process that turns me inward. And I love just playing every single week the opportunity to celebrate the beginning of Shabbos on Friday night. And so those are meaningful experiences for me, and I embrace them wholeheartedly.
Nice. Thank you. I just realized I never said what my favorite is. You probably have a lot of guesses for me as a rabbinical student. But actually, I think my number one favorite is the bracha that we recite in the month of Nisan when we see the flowering fruit trees for the first time. Because even long before I was religious, I really felt a connection the first time I would see in California, where I'm from. We don't have the almond trees. We won't sing Hashkedia Porachat here, but we had plum trees in my family's yard and all along my street growing up. And so the first one that would start to say, "Okay, go, go, go," just always really lit up my life and made me feel hopeful that, that's right, winter does end, and brings sort of that cycle of renewal. And so I love that exists in the Jewish tradition as well. And there's a special bracha only for that one moment. We use it once a year. So some of this came up a little already, but my next question for Monique and Booker is, what are some of your most dearly held identities? Clearly, we're all here as Jews, but you may have other identities that are sort of a key part of who you are as a human being. So if you have any other identities that you might want to mention or talk about, let's hear it.
Booker, do you want to go first this time?
No, you can go first this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
I I consider myself a Black Jew. Period. If someone asks me, that's it.
Thank you.
I think that for me, it was kind of interesting experience. My hidden identity, of course, is very obvious. I'm Black, so that's not hidden. I go around and I'm part of the Jewish community, so that's not really hidden. But my past is kind of hidden. And part of the past is the fact that, shockingly for some, I was born as a Jehovah's Witness. And as a Jehovah's Witness, I didn't celebrate Christmas and I didn't celebrate Easter. So I kind of felt real connected to the Jewish community hidden underneath when I was a kid growing up. And we did celebrate we didn't celebrate birthdays, everything else, but one thing we did celebrate, and that was on Nissan 14.
Hmm.
We had a chance to celebrate at the same time that the Jews celebrated Pesach. We celebrated something called Memorial Day with the matzah and the wine.
Hmm.
And so I
Wow.
kind of grew up with that kind of same feeling of cultural, social ostracism in many respects around holidays.
Mm.
And so that's my hidden identity, which is now open to the rest of you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Wow.
How do you feel like your life experience and your identities and all the qualities that make you you, how has that given you a unique and a valuable perspective in communal space?
Mm.
Maybe,
That's
go
a good
ahead.
question. Do you want me to go
Yeah,
first?
go ahead.
I think that a dear friend from Emanuel and I, we discussed this very thing, that she mentioned that she felt I keep one foot in both categories, I guess, well. And so I would say that I work hard to do that. Being Black and a part of the Black community is important to me, but being a part of the Jewish community is also important. So I try to balance them both. Some things that have happened recently and in the last several decades where the communities have divided has been very hurtful for me personally, because it's difficult at times to be in both areas, but equally committed to both, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard from some of my Black friends some of those same thoughts, that when something happens in current events and everyone on the news is talking about the Black community versus the Jewish community,
Right.
that leaves a whole bunch of people in the lurch saying, well, but there's overlap. Like, what about me? Don't you see me?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Monica. And I think that there is a kind of what I call it kind of um, a shared legacy that being
Yeah.
Black and being Jewish had. And like every time I, read historical narratives about the through centuries of what Jews have gone through, and then I read, what the Black American has gone through since 1619 here in the Western Hemisphere, and you look at the Holocaust, and you look at anti-Semitism, and you look at racism and everything else, you have this kind of shared feeling of absolute veneration, I'm sorry, denigration on the part of the culture at large. And so you
Right.
kind of bring both sides to what you have to do. And I think it is to look who we are as humans in the image of God. And I think that we have to do things like um, making sure that we continue to heal the planet
Mhm.
in our cultural societies, because that is our goal and our responsibility, both as a Black person and as a Jew.
Yeah, I agree fully.
Yeah, that there often seems to be, I've read everything from Medium pieces and op-ed things in the newspaper to academic articles arguing that there really historically and experientially ought to be a much greater degree of affinity,
Yeah.
not just in support of people who are both Black and Jewish, but just in general.
Right.
That if, Black folks and Jewish folks and those who belong to both of those communities could work together, understanding sort of each other's those struggles, and the systemic issues that affect us, we can really do a lot. That's part of why we're having this conversation right now.
Yes.
To hopefully build
Mhm.
some of that.
Right.
And it used to be that way.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's right.
And it's unfortunate that I have my own personal opinion of why things
Right.
went left, but probably not for a public forum. However, it used to be, our communities used to be much more tight and supportive of each other.
Yeah.
And it's sad to me, and many other Jews of color that I know, that things have gone sideways.
Yeah, I've been reading very slowly because am busy and can only read on Shabbos afternoon really. But I've been reading a very interesting book called The Price of Whiteness,
Mm.
by Eric Goldstein.
Mhm.
It's about exactly that history of there, was sort of a shared feeling, between Black people and Jewish people, and sort of the intermingling of the two,
Mhm.
historically. And then as the culture in the United States shifted, and as Jews, sort of white Ashkenazi Jews began to be accepted more as white, then that, and there's theories about why that was, and that some of it may have even been intentionally kind of a divide and conquer strategy on the part of the majority culture.
Mhm.
So, if we can do a little bit of bringing those ends back together, here, then that's tikkun olam too, I
Right.
think.
True. Very true.
Yeah. So let's talk about being Black in Jewish spaces. I want to hear both about some experiences that have felt very affirming, uplifting, welcoming, embracing, whatever uh, way of framing that brings something to mind for you. And then we'll also talk about some moments that maybe have felt profoundly alienating or othering or hurtful or disappointing.
Mhm.
Um,
Let me go
so
first. One of the things that
cool.
is kind of interesting, being in this wonderful place called Hartford, Connecticut. Can you hear me all?
Yep, we hear
Yes.
you.
Mhm.
Yeah, a wonderful place called Hartford, Connecticut. And I grew up in the 1960s, and there may be some people here on the in attendance that either recognized me or knew me or know my name or what have you. But I remember as a kid growing up, every time, every step that I took in trying to negotiate the roadway of life, there was always a person with a Jewish hand out there for me. My mother worked for Jews. My father was mentored by a Jew in for his trade. My mother cooked Jewish food because she cooked for Jews, and I thought that Jewish food was really soul food. I didn't know it was anything different because that's what I ate in the house. So every step of the way, when I go to high school, I see all these Jewish friends, and I get a job. I was working for Jews, for example. So it was always a Jew with the handout for me. So
So because
when I finally to say, okay, enough is enough of floating around this world, and let's really commit to Judaism. I did this, and all of a sudden, what happens? I join one synagogue, and I get on the board of that synagogue. I join another synagogue, and TBA, Jessica.
that's
I
Temple
go to
Beth
TBA,
Abraham for those
Temple
not from
Beth
Oakland.
Abraham, right? I get on another, I get on another board. I'm part of, the board of something else and something else, and so every step of the way, they selected me to be part of part of the community.
Mm,
One of the most meaningful things is that when I first went to Israel, and I said to myself, "Uh-oh, someone's going to challenge me
mm,
about being Jewish." You know, I had the biggest chip on my shoulder. You know, let me see what happens. I go to Israel. We land at Ben Gurion Airport. Some guy walks up to me and he looks at me, and I said, "Oh, come, here it comes." And he said, "Welcome back home."
Mm.
I went nuts. I went crazy. At that time, I didn't have my yarmulke with me. I immediately go to the store and I wear a yarmulke throughout my trip, trip to Israel. So I felt this immediate acceptance, which is really quite remarkable, and I will always hold that dear to my heart.
Yeah, that sounds like a really powerful experience, that the unquestioning, just here you are in a Jewish space, you belong just as you are, sounds like it really opened up a lot for you
Absolutely,
to experience the country on that trip.
absolutely.
Yeah, and having those early positive exposures to Jews in the Jewish community, even long before you became a Jew yourself, sounds like that was really shaped your view of what Judaism and Jews were like in
Oh
a way
yeah, I mean,
that
in
maybe
college,
many people don't have, who don't know that many
absolutely.
Jewish people.
Absolutely. I went to college, and you probably know the college. It's Central Connecticut State University is my undergraduate career. And man, I was the only Black person in my graduating class. But I had some really, really wonderful Jewish friends. One of them is, I think I saw his name here, is Michael Abrams' son, who was a hippy dippy, and we would sit there and play music and folk songs and everything else. And I really shared his feelings. He was a very Hamish kind of guy. He's probably changed now, but he's a Hamish kind of guy.
Yeah, he's here in the meeting. I see his
I
name.
know he is. Yeah, that's why I said
Yeah. So that just sort of contact and positive and regular
that.
interaction sounds like it was very powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Monique, let's turn it over to
Okay.
you.
So for the positive interactions, I think that having children kind of bonds people immediately. People
Mm.
start asking, grades, those types of things. And, oh, do you know so-and-so? And, oh, do you know so-and-so? When I moved to West Hartford 24 years ago, it was under extreme duress. And that's a topic for a different day. But my children had been at a Schechter in Florida, and then they started at a Solomon Schechter in the one in West Hartford. So I feel like children kind of overshadow some of the more direct questions that we'll get to that are not so positive interactions that I've experienced. But when there's children, there's a common thing to talk about right away. I too, when Booker talked about a chip on his shoulder, I get that because I expect questions.
That's right.
So when I walk into somewhere new, like when we start to shul shop here in New Jersey, there's just a sense of I belong, and I guess I'm just not the meek and mild type, but I worry about those who are. What about someone's personality who is a little more shy, but they're just as entitled to be in Jewish spaces as a Jew, as an equal, as anyone else. And so I expect the confrontation, not even confrontation. I expect the questions in a environment or a community that is not familiar with who I am. I don't like it, but the positives are when I know where I belong, then I just carry on that way.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. So
Yeah.
it sounds like having your kids as sort of an entree into the community helped you connect with certainly other parents, I would imagine with their teachers.
Right. And
Yeah.
having, 4 children who have been Jewishly educated over years, when you come newly to a community, there's not as many questions. But oh, I've received them. I've gotten them for sure. But when you have things that you can speak about that are familiar to everyone, no matter what race, ethnicity, it's a common denominator that makes us all similar.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of if you can speak the language, so to speak,
Right.
and not just Hebrew and Aramaic.
Right.
But,
It's the Jewish parent language.
yeah.
It's the sleepaway camp. It's the, Schechter, or religious school. As long as you're familiar with something. But, I always say, what if I was the Black Jew that was secular and wanted to expose my children or my family?
Right.
How would that greeting be?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Booker? When
Yeah,
you
I
relate
do.
to
It's
raising
kind
your
of
kids?
funny, Monica, when you were saying that, I was on a board of an organization out here called Behol Lashon. You're probably
Yes.
familiar with that.
I
And
don't think so.
one of the things is, of course, not everybody who was a member there was really, they were religiously Jews, but they weren't adherents. They were more secular,
Mhm.
and they were trying, and they didn't belong to a synagogue, or they weren't really, ardent Zionists or anything else. And so they felt really, 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 I think, isolated because they believed in the inner fabric of Judaism, but they didn't have the organizational structure in order to enable them to be accepted in the
Right.
community. So it was a kind of a difficult situation that we had to wrestle with. And sometimes we were successful and oftentimes we were not. They were still complaining
Yeah.
about how people, how the Jews would be, how the Jews treated them, and how the Jews treated them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
Mhm.
it's a complex situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know, B'chol Lashon is an organization that is by and for Jews of color of all ethnic backgrounds. Another friend of ours from Temple Beth Abraham in Oakland, Denise Davis, is sort of a big macher with this organization. So it's quite well known where we're from, but I am not sure that they have
Right.
quite as many inroads on the East Coast.
Right.
But it's a great organization. They run camps for kids from interracial families and students of color, and they have a lot of
Right.
educational materials and things available on their website. So
Oh,
if you
that's
don't know
great.
them, you can follow them on Instagram and on Facebook
Mhm.
and all the usual outlets. I think maybe at the end I'll find their web address and we can
Yeah.
post
Good
some links.
That'd be
Good.
great.
Yeah. Okay, so so what I'm hearing so far, the things that have made you feel positive, have made you feel welcome and accepted and part of the community, are things like unquestioning acceptance of your being in the place, easy ways to sort of reach out and connect with other people around shared experiences, um, having dedicated spaces that are for Jews of color, places where you can be Jewish among other Jews who share some of those experiences and are supportive and unquestioning of each other. Now let's think about what experiences have you had in Jewish spaces that did not leave a positive impression, that made you feel alienated or isolated or even attacked in certain ways?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm happy to tackle this one. As most people know, I don't shy away from the tough conversations. So something that comes to mind immediately and happened at the Emanuel, and we are dear friends, and this person shall remain nameless. But the greeting to me was when she first met me was, what did she say? What made you convert, or what made you become a Jew by choice?
Right.
And so I didn't answer the question because I didn't feel she was entitled to an answer. I could have been kind and made her feel comfortable, but why should I? What aggravates me the most is that I feel that Jews of color or people of color are questioned the most. You can be a secular Jew and get no questions. People just accept the fact that you grew up secularly or you chose to be secular. Nobody bats an eye. But if there's someone other than a Caucasian Jew in Jewish spaces, many times there's the third degree, and I don't appreciate it. And it depends really on my mood and how I respond, because I could say, and for all of my friends who have never broached this subject, I apologize in advance, but I could say, you're not one of those Jews that have never met anyone that's not a white Jew, are you? Think about that. Just pause and take that in for a second. Because to not ever meet or interact with non-white, non-European Jews, to me tells me a lot about the person questioning me.
Mm-hmm.
What makes someone feel that they have the right to give me the third degree at Kiddush? Like, this person made a beeline for me at Kiddush. That was the first question out of her mouth. So it was eating her up during services. So you're really not in the space to pray and gather amongst all of us. She came right for me with the question. So I just think it's grossly inappropriate. And I think that the Caucasian Jewish community needs to remember to approach someone that they're unfamiliar with as if they would another white person.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because, another white person that might be a guest for an event or something never gets the third degree. It's kind of obvious if they don't know what's going on, like what is the Kiddush or something. It tells me that they're not familiar. Either they're a secular Jew or they're a guest.
Right.
But I surmise the fact that they're a guest or a non-Jew, not based on ethnicity, but based on their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
That tells me, do they need guidance on what we do, or, to greet them and say hello and welcome. Are you here for the event that just happened, or something like that, rather than giving the third degree and assuming that, the Black person at Kiddush is the hired help, or is the person assisting someone else. Yeah, I could go on and on, so I will stop.
Okay.
Thank you, Monique, because my words exactly. Except one of the things that I get, and probably you don't get, look at the way you look compared to me, is people could say they walk up to me, and a lot of people, they're pretty nice, but they'll say something like, "Well, you don't look Jewish,"
Oh,
and that bothers me. It used to bother me more than it does right now, and
Mhm.
why? Because now I can make a joke of it. I can look at them and I'll say, let me look at your hair. Turn around, let me look at you. You don't have any horns or a tail. So to me, that gets out of this it makes them feel really ridiculous by making that comment to me. And it's one where I can have a little bit of humor,
yeah.
out of it, and I can go on. I also tell people, a lot of Jews don't realize what took place in the new state of Israel. But when a lot of the migrants were coming in from places not only from Bulgaria, but from the Middle East and other areas, and even you know, when we finally opened the doors of getting Jews to come in from Ethiopia, you know, we had people, the Ashkenazic, that look different from the Mizrahi, and certainly look different from the Sephardic. You know, there were lots of people, they were all Jews.
Right.
And so a lot of people don't understand that the Jewish people is such a diverse group of people
Right.
that come together for a reason, because of the Torah and the feeling of being what it really means to be a Jew
Mhm.
in this world. And so I think I have a chance. And, you know, I go back east sometimes to high school reunions. And at the time I was at Weaver High School, I wasn't, you know, Jewish. And people say, oh, you know, the first thing there, what made you do this? You know, why did you do this? And it said, and I took offense at first, but then I say, you know something? This is for me to educate you
Mhm.
of how important to be a Jew. A lot of, you know, white Jews, well, they went to, you know, day school, they were barred b'nai mitzvah, you know, they did everything else, they did all the right thing. They were forced to go into boxes and forced to do this and forced to go to school. Me, I chose based upon looking at the aspects of what really life is all about
Right.
and what our goal and responsibility is to really tikkun olam,
Mhm.
you know, mitzvah on this world.
Mhm.
And that's what a Jew is. And
Yeah.
I'm happy to be the fact that I tell people, Baruch Hashem, you know, I'm Black and I'm Jewish,
Yes. Yeah.
you know?
I belong to a couple of Facebook groups that are Jews of color, Jews in all hues, all sorts of different unique things. And I have to tell you that the way that white Jewish America treats the Jews of color in those Facebook groups is a real issue.
Mm-hmm,
They and their children
mm-hmm,
are shunned. So I think that white Jewish America is not doing the job that should be done for children, grandchildren, for the next generations, that they're not educating
right.
those around them. Because if someone says that to me, and I've gotten that occasionally, where you don't look Jewish, then I say, what does a Jew look like?
Yeah,
There are Jews in Italy. I had someone say there are no Jews in Italy. I said, yes, there are. Educate yourself.
that's right.
There's Mexican Jews, a large community, very insulated of Mexican Jews that are only conservative and Orthodox and really don't accept outsiders. Educate yourself, get out and see
Right.
what happens. There, speaking of student rabbis, Jessica, I talked to a rabbinical student who is a Mexican Jew once, and he said that a Caucasian Jewish woman, followed he and his wife around a kosher grocery store in New York for a good 15-20 minutes till he finally turned around and said to her, ma'am, is there something I can help you with? You clearly are following us. And she said, I'm trying to figure out what language you're speaking.
Uh-huh.
They were speaking Spanish.
Right.
Hebrew, she would have understood.
That's
But
right.
so that, the stories are endless.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, it really, it's a real thorn in my side that
Yeah.
those things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a common thread that I
Right.
hear from a lot of my friends who are Jews of color.
Yeah.
There's in a lot of social justice work, people talk about the difference between intention and impact.
Yes.
And a lot of some of the most hurtful things that I've heard from my friends and experienced myself as a convert to Judaism, and people perceive me as white, so I don't get challenges on those scores. But
Right.
eh, this idea that people had no intention to offend or to alienate or to hurt anyone's, they were just curious, they just wondered,
Yeah.
they just wanted to make sure that the shul was safe. I mean, it's all so many good intentions, and yet we also need to hold ourselves accountable for the impact that our words and our actions have on other people. And
Right.
sometimes there's a mismatch. I meant thing A, but actually I caused thing B to happen. Me just saying, oh, well, I didn't mean for that to happen,
Hmm.
Right.
is only the babyest first step, right?
Right.
Moving from,
Right.
okay, I didn't mean for that to happen. So how did it happen and what can I do better next time?
Right.
Is that internal process that I try to hold myself to. And I encourage others to, regardless
Right.
of, what your
Right.
background is.
That's
And
right.
usually people without bad intentions are upfront about, oh, I'm here just visiting, or, they speak to people, they are asking, what's the process here? Kiddush, usually things come to light. Or, if they're in the back of the synagogue, it's clear when someone is visiting, no matter their race, that
Right.
they are not a Jew.
Right.
And that's okay. But people wouldn't hesitate to walk up to someone, I hate to say, and say, someone who's white, and say, oh, welcome, are you here visiting? They don't question them about their Jewish lineage, and they don't get the third degree. They get, oh, nice. Oh, so-and-so did a great job. It's so nice to have you. It's a very different greeting.
Yeah.
But when someone is suspicious, and I have to just say, not to interrupt you, Booker, is
No, that's okay.
that when I was at Emanuel, and I don't remember how many months ago, pre-pandemic, I saw two people who were suspicious and happened to be white.
Right.
And I called the appropriate people. We immediately got a hold of the authorities. So no one is above suspicion for me personally. It
Right.
doesn't matter what race you are, what gender you are. I'm suspicious of anyone who clearly is out of place, and they clearly were out of place.
Right.
So that's what I would like to see the Jewish community spread, and educate children and grandchildren and the next generation and friends and whoever, neighbors, that, everyone that is Black or is a different race doesn't mean they don't belong at shul.
Right.
And so I would say that Emmanuel really is the issue, but it's more the broader Jewish community.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sadly, it's everywhere.
I don't get, you have to be careful to get too oversensitized about this too.
Mm.
One of the things that I say, for example, is I look at myself, I happen to be I'm a tall person, about 6'2". I still weigh about 210, 212 pounds. I have muscles. And I go into a synagogue someplace, not my own, and I go in the back there, and people are turning their heads, looking at me, and I say to myself, Booker, you know something? You could be an outside terrorist. They're afraid of you. They're cautious of you. Be careful of your actions. Smile, be gracious. At the end of the services, walk up to people, say something in Yiddish or something in Hebrew, to get them to relax a little bit because they're overcautious. Synagogues have to be nowadays. I
Oh, I
understand
agree.
that way things are going, for example.
Yes.
So I think that we have to be, it's almost like looking what John Lewis did or Martin Luther King did, you have to really pull back, your own fear, your own anger, and show love and appreciation to that person and look at that person from their their shoes, than from yours. And so it's a difficult process to do. We have to constantly think about this. It's more than just because everybody gets thrown into boxes. And you know something? I think it will continue onward and onward and onward. Someone, we always have to find something that we're fearful of, someone that we're fearful of, or something that we're fearful of. And we have to use that to just, it's like a religion, you know, they have to, as has been said, for example, I forgot his name, but he wrote the book, the anyway, he talks about looking at hate and fear and love and as religion. Hate and fear is based upon the devil. Love is based upon God.
Interesting. Yeah, so that sort of perspective taking and compassion and reaching for the love, I would love to live in a world where that always goes both ways, right? Where it isn't always
Yeah.
on the people of
Right.
color to be patient and understanding and try to
Right.
understand where people are coming from. That I would challenge all of us, you know, whether we're white or black or anything else at the Emanuel, to try to come from that place of love. Here is a person in our space. How can I include them? How can I reach out and make them comfortable and get to know them? And honestly, after the Pittsburgh shooting 2 years ago, that was sort of my number one takeaway, is that the best way to protect our spaces is to be aware of who is in them and to greet
Right.
every single person who
right.
comes in through the door, and to find out, not in a third degree invasive way, but just to smile and say Shabbat Shalom and sort of
Right.
get the vibe from that person. Because as Monique said, if something is off, our intuition is pretty good, and
Yes.
we'll, you know, we know when to be concerned, and you know, often we can push back on what we might think is suspicion or fear and say, well, wait, is there actually something to be afraid of here? Or is that just a story that society has taught me that I am allowed to challenge in this space because I want it to be the way I want it to be?
And I absolutely agree about safety. I am huge on safety, and anyone unfamiliar to the shul environment or any Jewish space should be taken cautiously. Some stranger, but my issue is all strangers equally, male or female, white or black, it doesn't matter, because the two people that were out of place at Emanuel were clearly white, but I knew immediately they did not fit. I said to my youngest daughter, I said, something is off with them. And she said, I felt like that too. They were parked in a different direction. They shouldn't be. A camera pointed at the school. It was clear to me that these two white people were out of place. They had no business to be there. And I didn't hesitate to bring it to someone's attention. But does everyone see the same thing? And I don't know that. I personally haven't had a problem at Emanuel, but I've been a member for many, many years. People know my face. So we will be shul shopping here in New Jersey. And I can tell you that we will be judging our future shuls on how we're greeted, how we're treated, what's on the website. Are they all white faces of all white Jews? I don't want to see that. Jews are not all white, period.
Yeah.
So will I judge them on their website? Absolutely.
Yeah, those first impressions really matter, whether it's on the website, whether it's in an email communication, whether it's in person.
Yeah.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'd like to move us to, since we are holding this event in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose birthday it is and whose holiday it is this weekend, I'm going to bring a quotation from one of his famous pieces of writing, The Letter from a Birmingham Jail. And as a way of introducing, and some of these ideas we've brought up already, but continuing the conversation about what can white Jews and what can Emanuel members broadly do to make sure that we are living our values of welcoming. So let me make sure I've got that ready to go. So here is the quote from Dr. King. Monique or Booker, would one of you like to read this out loud? I can if you don't want to, but I'll give you the chance.
Go ahead, read it. I can't even see it, yeah.
Okay. If neither of you would like to, I can do it. Teacher skills. So, as I said, this is from Letter from a Birmingham Jail. I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal that you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. We who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. We bring it out in the open where it can be seen and dealt with. So I imagine some of our listeners may be feeling that tension, right? There's racial issues both within the Jewish community and beyond can feel very fraught. And because of that, I think a lot of people tend to shy away from it. They don't want to bring it into the open. They don't want to have that conversation. So I'm really proud of everybody who came for this. And I'd love to talk about what attitudes or actions, and again, we've talked about some of this, but what would you like to see from your white neighbors, both at your synagogue and in the world in general? And what can those of us who have that position of privilege, whether earned or unearned, whether you identify actually as white or just the cops show up at your house and they're not going to accidentally shoot you, the homeowner, because they think you're white. What can those of us who are well-intentioned, who want to help make our spaces more understanding, more educated, more inclusive, what should we be doing or not doing?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say approach someone in the same way that you would approach them if they were white. Try not to see color in when you approach someone. I can only think of, just because that's where my mind is, in Jewish spaces, but don't assume that they've converted. Don't assume that they don't have the long lineage that you have of Jewish family members. And, it's not someone else's place to figure out who's a Jew and who's not. So trying to approach someone as if they were white, if that makes sense. That's the only way I can think of it, because I know that if I were a guest somewhere and were white, I would not get the questions that I get.
Yeah. So being conscious of those perhaps not innate biases, but implicit biases.
Right.
Of
Because people, as you get to know people, they will come out with what their story is little by little. So I just feel that secular Jews kind of have this open, they're free to be not observant, to be secular, more so than a minority Jew in the same Jewish space. For some reason, it's more accepted.
Yeah.
I kind of resent it, actually.
Jews of color who feel like they're forced to sort of declare and defend themselves as Jews in a way that white Jews are not.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know how, I haven't been back to the Hartford area in such a very, very long time, but I do remember, for example, that there was a clear separation based upon housing, where you lived in Hartford, even the northwest part of Hartford where Weaver High School was. And I remember a lot of the the Jews were leaving the Hartford area, the northwest part of Hartford, Granby Street and Blue Hills Avenue and everything else. And they're going to what we called it the reservation area of West Hartford, the Iroquois, Pequot and everything else. And so I think what we had, for example, and this happens during the same time that, in the 1960s and early part of the 1970s, where we had a lot of Jews who were supporting the civil rights in the 1960s, Abraham Joshua Heschel, and other noted people, for example, who were marching with Martin Luther King and fighting for the rights of everyone to exist, whether you're Jewish or Black. And I think that things began to split up in the latter part of the 1960s, early part of 1970. After Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968, and of blessed memory, Abraham Joshua Heschel, I think he died in 1972, we had this kind of separation that was taking place. Jews began to look at more of the caste system, of where you're located economically, rather than where you're located in terms of your shared legacy. I think we have got to get back to what our shared legacy has been, and even in the United States, what our shared legacy has been, because most everyone who came to the United States came as immigrants, whether you're from Italy or from Europe or from South America or whatever. So we have to come together based upon that kind of goal. I think we need to have a shift more about who we are as individual humans with ethics and high moral standard. Now, I'm conditionally optimistic. I see some changes that are taking place, to be honest with you. I look at the bad thing about what happened in 2020, but I'm looking forward to the future, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. When you're looking forward to the fact that what is really important about being a human being in terms of the protection of your community. That's the number one drive that we should all have. So I can see, for example, when you see images of the attack on the Capitol, and there's the Camp Auschwitz stuff on their jerseys, and the neo-Nazis and fascist and totalitarian, authoritarian people, for example, anti-Semites, racists, we're all in the same boat. We have to come together to really start protecting who we are as people, regardless of your color. So I have hope that we were sleeping with just the caste designations, and now I see signs of some changes that will take place. This is a great opportunity that I see for all of us.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about oh, when will things go back to normal? But there are certain parts of what we've been socialized to accept as normal that hopefully we don't go back to when
That's
we're
right.
back in person.
Agree.
Couple other things that I've heard and that some people have private messaged me in the chat is challenge your assumptions about who is staff and who is a guest when you're in the
Yes.
synagogue.
Yes.
Every single friend of color that I have has at least one and sometimes a whole bunch of horrifying stories about people assuming that they're the non-Jewish custodians or the non-Jewish catering staff. And just sort of have that metacognitive loop. This is something that I work on actively, and I can, I think I'm relatively okay at it, but there's always room to grow. I know that I mess up. But having that loop of trying to see from the other person's perspective assuming that everyone in a Jewish space is a Jewish person going to feel offended or alienated by what I'm about to say, then maybe I should walk it back for a second
Mhm.
and think about it.
Right.
What about those inevitable moments where we mess up and we do or say something that hurts somebody else? How should someone handle it when they realize, oh no, I said something out of line and now I've caused this problem or become part of this problem?
I think you should you should take what we go through in Yom Kippur every single time this happens in our lives. Look inward in yourself, confront that person, and what's wrong with apology?
Yeah. I have received apologies where, you know, someone was horrified at, just out of educating herself, she was horrified at her first approach, making that beeline to me. And so I accepted it sincerely, but it's because I had gotten to know her over the years and we became
Right.
friends. It really depends. I have to say, I'm not so gracious, and as we're shul shopping in New Jersey, if someone says something, I probably would not judge a synagogue based on congregants. I presume that clergy know better. So if it's someone in a leadership position, then we have a problem. We're moving on. So, it just really depends on my mood. It sounds like Booker is much more kind and understanding than I am. I get tired of it. It gets old.
Yeah.
It just really does. I feel that someone should pay attention to the guests in a Jewish space, their behavior. Their behavior will tell you a lot about whether they're Jewish or not, regardless of skin color or what you believe it to be true. If you watch how they behave, you'll know, one, if they're a threat, regardless of color. Two, if they know what they're doing or kind of know where they can navigate what's happening. I think it's obvious. So I'm not always kind when people approach me in a way that I'm just kind of sick of hearing it. I don't want to hear the apology. I think we as adults know how to control the things that come out of our mouths. So the apology is okay sometimes, but sometimes I feel, no, think about the things that you say
Yeah.
before you say it.
But when when I'm talking about apologizing, I also talk about engaging in that process with a dialogue,
Mhm.
a communication with that person. In other words, it's more than just saying, you said something to me.
Yeah.
Why don't I have a dialogue of saying, why did you say this to me?
Yeah.
Where did it come from?
Right.
And that's an opportunity, I think, to open up people to say, maybe, well, because I came from a background, whatever, and I feel that you're, this, that kind of stuff. And that's the way you can really engage yourself with people, and from the true rabbinic,
Right.
fashion, right,
Right.
Jessica?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to ask ourselves. I'm thinking of a parallel in, the LGBTQ community where
Right,
someone misgenders someone else, uses the
Mhm.
right,
incorrect pronouns for them, and that the best thing, there's two things that you need to do when that happens, and we always say when because human beings are full of errors. We get things wrong all the time,
Right. Yeah.
and that's just part of existing as a human. Um, but this idea of yes, acknowledging that you did or said something wrong and apologizing for it in a way that is sincere, but also, I think, Monique, I'm hearing in what you were saying about this one apology that you got that was so meaningful to you. It was in private. It was sincere. and it was someone with whom you had already at that time and have continued to have an ongoing relationship.
Right.
You really need to think about, why am I apologizing? Am I apologizing because I feel bad and I want to not be perceived as a bad person, because I want to, try to like, oh, well, but I'm not like that,
Mhm.
right? That kind of apology, I think, is the one that you are fed up with.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
one that is, oh, I care about you as a person. I realize that I did something to hurt you. You are important enough that I do want to have that ongoing relationship.
Mhm.
An apology coming from that sort of relationship building, rather than, just covering your errors kind
Yes.
of frame, I think ends up being more meaningful and more productive.
Right. Because I feel like, the questioning of lineage or the roots of a family's Jewishness is really a clergy conversation. It's not appropriate for congregants to feel that it is their place to ask for, you know, how many Jews are in your family. Can you imagine, just for a second, if, you know, I'm visiting somewhere and, a white Jew who looks like they belong, I ask them to run down who's Jewish in their family. Can you imagine that? Just for a second, the roles being reversed. I
Yeah.
think that congregants at times take on the roles of clergy, and that's inappropriate. It just is. When I approached the Rabbi Small, about getting married, he didn't care. He didn't question me about the fact that I was marrying a woman. He wanted to make sure that she was Jewish.
Mhm.
And if she was Jewish, then that was critical to him. But he didn't question me about, well, how did you get here and what happened? And, that would not have gone over well, but he needed to know that she was Jewish. And so I think that some of the questioning people need to, for, just remember their place. They're not the clergy. If I'm approaching a synagogue about having some event, the clergy, the rabbi, the cantor, somebody's going to get my lineage out of me to make
Yeah.
sure that it's appropriate that I'm doing this. But they're going to do that for anyone, no matter their race.
Right.
And so leave that type of questioning for those who it's appropriate for them to question.
And in the Jewish tradition, one of the stories that's told about the book of Genesis that we get from Rashi is, there's this idea, well, why do we even have the book of Genesis? We don't have the first commandment for so much longer. Like, why do we need all this backstory? And Rashi explains that we need this story to remember that we all come from one source, so that no person in the future could ever say that my ancestors are greater than yours.
Right.
Right.
And
And yet we do.
I
And yet people do.
yep, it happens.
So,
Yeah, I think it's so powerful and so hard, but also so important for people sometimes to just sit with the curiosity about, like, oh, here is this new person. I don't really know
right.
who they are. I, don't drive the interaction with your curiosity if you're in a position of relative power, whatever the context is, but
Mhm.
listen to people and let people tell you about themselves. I think one of you had mentioned that
Right.
whatever they want you to know, they're going to tell you. And let
Right.
the story,
It'll come out.
let the identity and the personality come out in the course
Yes.
of actual, genuine relationship building interaction.
Right. Exactly.
Um, any last words? We're about to open it up for questions. Anything that you were hoping to be able to convey that we have not touched on so far from either Booker or Monique?
I just want to say a very simple statement that I was born Jewish.
Mm.
And why do I say that? I was born in a family of my mother and my father who both realized the importance of protecting our human society, of going forth with empathy and understanding and a commitment to making the world a better place. So I was born Jewish. It took many years for me to really admit to that and go through the formal conversion and everything else. But that was just a way of telling the world what deep, deep down inside I was. And that's it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's well put, right? All of our souls were at Sinai,
Yeah.
regardless of what context we found ourselves being born into. Okay, and with that, I will ask the host to unlock the mute and the video so that we can see each other. And if you have questions, we've got 14 minutes left on this program. You can raise your actual hand or you can raise your digital hand, or you can use the chat. If you have questions, comments, responses, let's come back together as a community. Or if you just want to come on video and be present and visible and say hi, that's also okay. Okay, I see a question from Roberta.
Rabbi, I miss you so.
David Small.
Roberta, you had a question?
A lot of comments being made by the guest lecturers who grew up in a small Connecticut town, as I did, where there were very few Jews. Although I did not experience anti-Semitism, some of my family did, especially my sister. And the Catholic boy stood up for her. Some Jews in the town were uncomfortable in the Catholic.
Roberta, we're having trouble hearing you. Is it possible to move your computer closer to you or you closer to the microphone?
Let me just make sure that I'm sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, that's better. Try again.
Okay. You want me to read it again? Okay. A lot of comments that were made by the guest lecturers relate to me, who grew up in a small Connecticut town where there were few Jews. Although I did not experience anti-Semitism, at least I wasn't aware of it, some of my family did, especially my sister, and a Catholic boy stood up for her. Some Jews in town were uncomfortable in the Catholic Christian community. And I'm wondering if the guest speakers relate to this kind of thing, because I'm, 99% Ashkenazi white. So we also have problems. We white Ashkenazis who did not grow up in a ghetto kind of community. That was my thought about this. Thank you so much. I think these lecturers and comments were fantastic. And thank you, Gail, for arranging this.
That's a great comment. Can I talk about that?
Yeah, please.
Thank you for saying that, because it helps me remember that it's not perfect for white Jews, where I think those of us who are questioned constantly have to remember. So thank you for saying that. I have to say that my wife and I, Leah, we just moved to a founded Christian community. This town is 1 square mile, and it's founded by the Camp Meeting Association, which is Christian Methodist. And we were concerned about moving here, but we found the Jews. So I've never moved anywhere. Even when I moved to Japan for 3 years ago, I always find the Jews within the community. So even though we're surrounded by Christians here, I found the Jews before we chose this. And I think that
Methodist, I think.
in doing that, it helps us be bonded. Thankfully, I have not been questioned about my Jewish lineage by the Jews in town, but it's abundantly clear there are a couple of crosses on the beach, not in the section that we are, thankfully, but we are definitely a minority within this community. So I think I can identify a little bit about how you feel, but I didn't care we pay our taxes like everybody else, and we decided to live here because everyone's been kind. But it was clear that we were one of the houses that did not decorate for Christmas, and I didn't care.
Yeah. I see we have a question from Bob Fishman.
I can't seem to get my videos. They have to,
That's okay. We can hear you though.
but as long as you can hear me. Booker, it's a pleasure to meet you. Are you named? I have several questions for you. Are you named after Booker T? And I also wanted to tell you
Look at that.
that your point about housing is spot on. And today, not in the Hartford Courant, a former writer for the Hartford Courant, Susan Campbell, has a very good piece in the Connecticut Post. That's basically a Bridgeport area paper. And she talks about how the Real Estate Association is now, for the first time, insisting that to be relicensed, you have to go through a 3-month course to understand. They don't use the word redlining anymore, but to understand that the lack of integration in housing in Connecticut is often due to the real estate agents. And I think that's a very significant issue. I plan to teach a course with our JT Connect, our teens, on Blacks and Jews, past alliances, and present challenges
Great.
when things open up. I think kids really would like to know that, and like to know some of the good and some of the bad that's been going on in Hartford. And I have that experience from my work. And I did want to tell you about West Side Gravy for both of you. Have you heard of West Side Gravy?
Yes, I
This
follow
is-
him.
I met Noah at a seminar that I attended for 2 weeks at Oxford University on global anti-Semitism. And I've used his rap with teenagers at JT Connect. And he's quite amazing.
He is.
Black mother and Russian Jewish father. That's Noah Shufatinsky is his
Yes.
name. But to tell you the truth, he's at a big synagogue in Washington, Addis, Israel. And I would say I've been there several times, and I grew up there. When I grew up there, you didn't see Black Jews. But today, there's maybe 10 or 12 out of several hundred people. And that's not what we have in Hartford today. And the last thing I wanted to ask, if either of you knew about Jamaican Jews.
Yes. Okay, that's a lot, but let me go to the most important thing. No, I wasn't named after Booker T. Washington. I was named after my father, who was named after Booker T. Washington. I was a junior, but I decided I hate junior. I just trashed it. So I go by Booker Holton right now.
Got it.
But you're absolutely correct about the housing situation. I strongly recommend you, if everybody, if they have not read it, read Richard Rothstein's book, The Color of Law. It's an amazing book because what he talks about is the covenant codes and the issues dealing with housing that took place from World War II until very, very recently, about segregating households across the country, including even those military veterans who came from World War II, fighting for our country. And even though the government said that they could have some housing legislation to get them housing, Black soldiers were denied. And so it was an issue that has gone back for a long, long time, and it's been verified by by law, and that's kind of what it is. And you had a third part of the question I can't remember anymore.
Oh, Jamaican Jews.
Oh yes, Jamaican Jews. Yes. If you go to Behol Lashan, and I think Jessica, if you could
I just put
provide
it
a
in the chat
link,
moments ago.
it could be great, because you'll find out, for example, that there were a lot of Jews that came from the Inquisition and afterward to other areas of the Caribbean, including Trinidad and Jamaica, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, for example, and other areas. So there was a tremendous number of Black Jews that were there for a long, long, long time. I even know, for example, it's kind of interesting when you look at, they did some DNA analysis of the Limbas in South Africa, Black people, and they found out that from a DNA analysis, they found out that a fair number of them had the Kohanim genetic display. So that tells you a lot. I'm wearing a yarmulke right now from a group in Uganda, named the Abayudaya, who back in the early part of the last century, the Brits were coming down and they were telling, these people, let's convert them to Christianity. And the head of the Abayudaya tribe said, I don't think we want to go that way, because we've been reading this Torah, and I think that's the way we want to be. So he converted by circumcising himself, and then he circumcised the male leaders of the tribes. And from about the 1910s until now, they identify themselves as Jews. In fact, there was about maybe like 10 years ago, there was a bunch of rabbis that came from the United States, and they formally converted them as Jews. And so they have a synagogue and everything else. In fact, they even have one of the rabbis who I met in Jerusalem, that he's now going back there, and he's a big macher with the government. So, yeah.
Rabbi
all over
Gershom
the world.
Zomo.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm putting some other resources in the chat that are other great ways to learn about Jewish communities all over the world. I, as a Spanish speaker, am particularly interested in sometimes they're called emergent communities, sometimes they're called returning communities of
Right.
Latin Americans who are descended from, in some part, from many of the Sephardi Jews who in 1492 saw, getting on the boat with Columbus as the easiest way to get out of Dodge and escape the Inquisition. And so a really surprising proportion of people from Latin America have at least some Jewish ancestry. And in a couple of places, whole communities are coming back to the Jewish fold and saying, we want to reclaim this, we want to be Jewish, we want to learn. So I'll put another organization called Kulanu that helps a lot with that effort. That'll come in the chat in a moment.
Okay.
Do we have any last questions? I see Michael Abramson. Go ahead.
He has
Muted.
you have to
Unmute.
unmute yourself. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make a short comment to Booker, or to everyone about Booker. I've known him since 1963, probably in a botany class, and then many other classes, English, philosophy with Dr. Auger. He's been a mensch from 63 through now. He's an amazing individual, gifted in many, many areas, as you could see. You've heard him for an hour and a half, and he's just getting greater and greater through all this time. Thanks for coming. Thanks for allowing me to zoom in on you.
Where do I send the check?
And thanks, Joanne and Saul Pasternak, for telling me about this program.
Great,
Thank you, Michael.
All right, so I'm putting in the chat. This is the link to Kulano's, another organization that you might want to check out if you're interested to learn more. Specifically, the Abayudaya, I have a personal friend named Rabin, who I met when I was studying in Israel, who is from that community in Uganda and has been learning in Israel. He's returned back to his wife in Uganda. But one of the ways that the community supports themselves is by selling kippot. So if you've been admiring the one that Booker is wearing, I'm not wearing one of my Abayudaya right now, but I have a couple that I wear also. And if you're interested in supporting that community by adding to your collection of kippot, you can email me and I got the hookup. I can connect you to purchase any of those. So unless we have any other burning questions, it is now 9:02, so we are officially ended. Thank you so much to everyone for coming and joining and listening. I really, really do think that listening deeply and sharing personal stories is the #1 best way to expand our knowledge, to expand our neshamas, expand our souls, and to make sure that we are living our Jewish values in every aspect of what we do. Toda Rabba to Booker and to Monique for sharing your souls with us, for sharing your words and your experiences, and
Thank
your
you for having
generosity
me.
in joining us for this conversation. May the spirit of Dr. King be upon all of us this weekend, and may we always be on the lookout for ways that we can reflect, for ways that we can reach out, that we can be the person who includes and connects to someone in a new and powerful way.
Thank you so much.
Jessica.
Monique and Booker. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica.
It was
Thank you,
terrific.
Booker and Monique.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent program.
Excellent.
Bye.
Very good program. Hi, Monique. It's Michael Kamens. I sure miss you.
I miss you too. Thank you.